talking about the Western tradition of theater, what do we mean by that? First, I'd start if one talks about performance and performance elements, it goes back much further and can be found all over other parts of the world. And that's performance that's often connected with social rituals, religious rituals. It's sort of an all-encompassing term. When one is talking about the Western tradition of theater, one is talking about the tradition that actually starts with the Greeks and just sort of put together by them for the first time. And it's the entire package. As I said, if you look at individual bits and pieces, the Egyptians do this, or Aboriginal peoples will do that, or so there's all sorts of social or religious rituals. What you find is this is the first time that the whole package gets put together as one piece, and that includes primarily an understanding of theater as an imitation of human beings or men in action. That is, what it does is it talks about the world, what's considered true, beautiful, good in the world, and how that is reflected specifically in drama. And so it's affected by two things. One is certainly what you feel should be represented on the stage, what's appropriate to put there, and what you effectively can put on the stage. Given your technology, when Aristotle says you shouldn't put violent death on stage, he means in one way maybe it's too violent, or you don't get distance from it, but he said it could also be absurd if you just don't have the technology to do it. So it's aesthetic, but it's also practical. Aesthetics is kind of the gateway between that, and that is, what is actually a play? The Greeks are the first to say, this is really what a play is, what it does not do, how it differs from things like poetry or the epic, how it differs from other humanities, like politics or history or political history. So it both defines what it is, what is not, what its personal function is, its social function, and its religious, spiritual function. So it carries all of that. So that's what aesthetics does. And that includes certainly the two big genres, tragedy and comedy. And at least in our tradition, an emphasis on the text as being the most important element of the play. So Western theater has a six-point alphabet. Text, which deals with the plot, the character and the theme, and then the means of representation, which are song, spectacle, and text. So what is oral, what is visually represented. The way that plays out then is into the elements of performance and production, that you have an audience, you have architecture, you have costume and set design, and into the text, and that's the last component. So you put those together and you have got the theater. And Western theater in particular is defined by the Greeks, by Aristotle. The idea of genres, of hierarchies, and an emphasis on the ratiocentric approach. And to the extent that the European tradition and things like Canada and America also are based on aesthetics that come from the Greeks, that sort of is the basis of the Western tradition. And I often tell my students, even when you get to the later stages, it's going back to Aristotle and saying, well, that's where we agree with him, that's where we disagree with him, we're going to rework him, but one way or another people always come back to that as the tradition that we go from. Eastern tradition, Sanskrit, Japanese, Chinese, comes out of a different aesthetic basis. And so while they also have aesthetics, while they also are combinations of text and performance and aesthetics, it's a very different based one. And so that's kind of the distinction between the two.